employs the largest chunk of people. And of course, the NBFCs are an important part of this as well, because NBFCs are a conduit to resources reaching to those parts of the economy where the bank, which are underbanked or very often not properly banked. So all of these are ultimately about getting money out there, which then feeds through to somebody's hand. So I think this is an important step. But you're right, there, where direct transfers need to be made, that too will be looked into.
All right, so direct transfers will also be looked into. Are you also giving us a cue on what is set to come over the next few days, sir?
That is, of course, obviously for the finance minister to announce, not for me to speculate on. But as I said, today was about a certain set that we announced, which is related to one segment of the economy. And of course, even in terms of putting money into people's pockets, you saw that we have put together stuff on the EPF as well. So even in today's, there was some degree of putting money into people's pockets directly, but and then delaying certain deadlines and so on, putting together the force majeure clause where necessary for a 6-month delay in various contracts and so on. So today was not about the sort of direct injections. Today was about the MSME injecting liquidity into the financial system, particularly the NBFCs, and so on. So this was really what today's announcements were about.
We're talking about a 20 lakh crore rupee package, and which is why it is important that, since you're looking at these numbers very carefully, let me ask you on where will this take our, fiscal position. Everybody has been talking about how we should not be too hell-bent on the fiscal deficit target at this point of time. We need to be a little more flexible with it. Where does this 20 lakh crore rupee number takes our fiscal deficit number to? In fact, the initial calculations that are being done is to the tune of 5.6 to 5.7%. Is that the kind of number that we're looking at by the end of this fiscal year, sir?
So let's go through the full cycle of announcements. Then you will have a sense of the fiscal resources. Remember, not all these resources are coming from the fiscal front. Some of in the fund in the form of guarantees. Some of them is in the form of monetary stimulus and so on. So there is a range of methods through which these resources are being put through. Nonetheless, you already have a hint about the fiscal resources that we will deploy from last week's increase in the borrowing limit. So you know that we are looking at some expansion in the fiscal deficit, and we have prepared for that using the borrowing program. But as I said, not all of this is going to be on the fiscal front. Some of it will come in other forms, and you got some taste of that today. So
the reason that I'm asking you this question. The reason that I'm asking you this question is also the fact that a lot of people say that the borrowing target that has been hiked at this point of time will only offset some of the revenue, deficit that we are going to have, the loss in revenues due to the fact that there was an economic lockdown. Will we look at borrowing more, as and whenever we feel that yes, a much needed push is needed for the economy, and which is why we need more money? Is that something that the government would actively contemplate on?
So we will look at how things evolve. But of course, one thing, let me be very clear, that if your question is really about the yield curve and the impact that changes in borrowing programs may cause to the yield curve, let me say that that the Reserve Bank has lots of space in order to manage the yield curve, particularly given the fact that global interest rates are so low. And in any case, given the demand conditions in India and worldwide, there is really no inflationary threat. So in that context, let me be clear that the RBI can use, it has many resources, including the OMO, in order to make sure that the yield curve remains well managed And in fact, if you ask me, the government should expect the interest rates to decline from here on. Given the reverse repo rate where it is, I would say that the government should be borrowing a lot less than 6% for 10 years. So I would expect that to drop by, maybe 100 basis points over time.
All right, and with that, it's time out right here on the show. Many thanks for watching. Good evening. You've tuned into ET Now, and this is a special show. From minutes from now, we will have the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who will be unveiling the details of the mega 20 lakh crore power plan as well right now. But before we get that, we get the presser going. Let's get you a chunk from Nirmal Jain. Can stimulus revive the COVID cloud? Earlier today, we caught up with market veteran Nirmal Jain, who's positive about recovery. Here's why.
I think the package is strong and intentions are right. But only thing we need to see how is it executed and whether the intended benefits and the money reaches the intended segments of businesses and economy or not. Because if you really see, then, in case of NBFC, whatever has happened in the last 1.5 years, some of the schemes have been fully, effective, some of them have been partially effective, and some of them have been totally ineffective. Just to take, say, for NBFC now, there's a 30,000 crore of liquidity. But they are saying that secondary, both the bonds will be allowed to be bought in this. So when you have a secondary bond, then the money goes to the mutual funds. It doesn't go to NBFC. And it doesn't help. So in here also what happened that banks borrowed money at a very cheap rate from RBI and they lent it to AAA grade NBFCs or AAA grade corporates, and they actually can borrow from the market also. So what they did, they took the money and replaced their high cost debt with the low cost money from banks. entire subsidized money went actually not into the hands of
Well, right now we're standing by for that press conference to start. FM Nirmala Sitharaman will be unveiling the second tranche of relief measures, part of the mega package which was announced by PM Modi 2 days ago. A host of sectors are yet to be covered. Yesterday, all eyes were mainly, the focus was mainly on MSMEs as well as NBFCs. Let's see what today will be unveiled as well. But yes, what we're picking up from reports and from street chatter, etc., is that perhaps something could be in store for the poor, for the farmers, for the agri sector. That's what our sense is. We might be totally wrong right now, but definitely that is something that has been on the government's radar for quite some time as well. So that's definitely something that we will be watching out for closely, the second tranche of details. Yesterday, of course, she had announced the mega relief package for small and medium businesses, NBFCs, and even the power distribution companies, Discoms, were, 90,000 crore relief package was announced for the Discoms as well. We've seen them rally as well. The conference has started. Let's hear out from the finance minister herself.
After the announcement of the first tranche of stimulus package of rupees 20 lakh crore, the finance minister is going to share more details of the package under mission Atmanirbhar Bharat announced by the Prime Minister. First, the finance minister and MO's finance will brief. Later on, we will take more questions from you. Ma'am, please.
Good afternoon, friends. Today is the second tranche of announcements towards building a Atmanirbhar Bharat. The slides will go on, but before we start the slides, just want to let you know that today's initiatives, which are getting announced as a part of the second tranche that we are announcing today, focuses on migrant workers, street vendors, small traders, self-employed people, small farmers. And when I say small farmers, there are a few items we say. So in all, about 9 steps that I will be announcing today. 3 relating to migrant workers, 1 related to the Sishu loan within Mudra, 1 related to street vendors, 1 housing, 1 related to employment generation largely for tribals and in those in the tribal pockets, and 2 related to farmers, particularly small farmers. But even as I say this, since you have been keenly listening and hearing what we are saying, many of them may have overlaps with the next package that we'll announce. So on farmers, for example, it's not as if I'm giving only 2 steps, nothing more. Arey kisan ke liye chhod de kaam. No, there will be more. But today I'm bringing in 2. Just as I said, in each of the package, we'll keep in mind and prioritize concerns related to migrant workers, poor, those who are, in need, and therefore that will continue. So if I have not spoken about a certain thing today, it's not as if Government of India has forgotten. After all, let's please remember, within hours of having announced the lockdown, the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana was for the poor, was for transferring cash to the poor, was for giving grains for the poor, and so on. And that's not enough. We will come with more. We are announcing more. So let's not look at each one of the silo as though that was the only thing. As I said earlier, there are tranches of announcements. Many things might overlap. Many of them might get mentioned here as well as mentioned once more somewhere else. So just a broad understanding on that. And before I get to talking about what we are doing on the migrants, I just want to let you know that about 3 crore farmers had availed loans which were given to them earlier in concessional rates, I think, which was direct support to farmers. And those 3 crore farmers had availed of agricultural loans which were over 4 lakh crores. 3 crore farmers who are marginal farmers had already benefited from 4 lakh crores of credit given to them. And those people who have availed of these credit through the Reserve Bank were also given a moratorium. For the next 3 months, you don't have to pay your EMI and so on. Now, the interest subvention, which is normally given for prompt repayment in time, was extended till March. Now we are extending it up to 31st May 2020. So that is a thing which was already availed of, and for that we are giving a bit of an extension. And in the last 2 months, 25 lakh new Kisan credit cards have been given, which entails that they can take concessional credit. They're actually marginal farmers. So we've not forgotten them. And those 25 lakh new Kisan credit card holders have also been given or sanctioned a loan which totals to 25,000 crores. These are recent happenings. So there may have been a lockdown, but the government was not sitting quiet. It has been attending to a lot of those who are in the margins of our society, who are desperately in need of assistance to carry on with their small work. So that is something which I want to draw your attention to before we move on to today's package.
धन्यवाद। मैं सबसे पहले तो मीडिया के अपने मित्रों का आभार प्रकट करता हूं, जिन्होंने आत्मनिर्भर भारत इस संकल्प को, इस अभियान को जन जन तक पहुंचाने का काम किया है। पिछले 2 दिनों में पूरे देश भर में आपने चर्चा को बदला है, एक सकारात्मक सोच खड़ी हुई है। इसके लिए मैं आप सबका बहुत बहुत आभार प्रकट करता हूं। अगर 2014 में भी देखें तो मोदी जी ने अपने सबसे पहले भाषण में यही कहा था कि ये उनकी सरकार वो जो गरीबों के लिए सोचे, जो गरीबों को सुने, गरीबों के लिए जिए, और इसलिए नई सरकार देश के गरीबों को समर्पित है, युवाओं को, महिलाओं को समर्पित है। गांव हो, गरीब हो, पीड़ित हो, वंचित हो, ये सरकार उनके लिए है। हमें गरीब से गरीब आदमी की मदद करनी है। और पिछले 6 वर्षों में आपने देखा होगा, इस देश में गरीबों के उत्थान के लिए मोदी सरकार ने बहुत काम किया। मैं उन योजनाओं पे आज नहीं जा रहा, लेकिन किसान की बात कर रहे हैं। पीएम किसान सम्मान की बात हो, 6,000 हर किसान के खाते में, प्रधानमंत्री फसल बीमा योजना हो, किसान क्रेडिट कार्ड की बात हो, सॉइल हेल्थ कार्ड की बात हो। जो गरीब कभी अपनी इंश्योरेंस के बारे में नहीं सोचता था, 22 करोड़ से ज़्यादा गरीबों की इंश्योरेंस करवाने की बात हो। गरीब का बैंक खाता बैंकों के राष्ट्रीयकरण करने के बाद भी नहीं खुलता था, उन बैंकों का उनका बैंक खाता भी खुला। और इस कोविड-19 की स्थिति में अगर सीधा खाते में पैसा किसी ने भेजा है तो नरेंद्र मोदी जी की सरकार ने पारदर्शिता के कारण भेजा। तो गरीब की हर समय चिंता किसी ने की तो नरेंद्र मोदी जी की सरकार ने। और कल भी जो आपकी चिंता का विषय था, और हम सब भी देखते हैं कि जो गरीब वापस भी जा रहा है उसकी मदद कैसे की जाए, तो आज हम आप सबके सामने आए हैं। कल एमएसएमई सेक्टर की मदद की तो 12 करोड़ लोगों को ये मध्यम लघु सूक्ष्म उद्योग रोजगार देते हैं। अगर उनकी मदद हुई तो अप्रत्यक्ष तौर पर गरीब मजदूर की मदद भी कल की गई। और कहीं ना कहीं जो इतना सकारात्मक वातावरण बना, लोगों के पॉजिटिव मैसेज आए कि ये अच्छा हुआ, इससे उद्योग को फ़ायदा मिलेगा, छोटे उद्योगों को फ़ायदा मिलेगा, तो इससे गरीब को भी बल मिलेगा। तो आज का जो हम करने जा रहे हैं, गरीब के लिए, प्रवासी मजदूर के लिए और एक दो बिंदु किसानों के लिए, आज बाकी अगले प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस में आप सबके सामने आएगा। तो इसमें मुझे केवल इतना ही कहना है, और मोदी जी ने इसको 12 तारीख को भी माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कहा था कि आर्थिक पैकेज देश के उस श्रमिक के लिए, देश के उस किसान के लिए है जो हर स्थिति में, हर मौसम में देशवासियों के लिए दिन रात एक करके मेहनत करता है। और इसमें अगर देखा जाए तो जो पहली घोषणा है, जो हमने अब तक कदम उठाए, वो लगभग 3 करोड़ किसानों के लिए जो कृषि ऋण है वो 4,22,000 करोड़ के वो अवेल कर चुके हैं। पिछले 3 महीनों में उसके लिए लोन मोरेटोरियम दिया गया है ताकि उनको उसमें छूट दी गई है कि 3 महीने तक उनको वापस नहीं करना है। इंटरेस्ट सबवेंशन दी है, ब्याज पर सहायता दी है, त्वरित भुगतान यानी कि प्रॉम्प्ट रीपेमेंट करने पर इनको इंसेंटिव दिया है, क्रॉप लोन्स पर, और ये भी जो 1 मार्च से उनकी ड्यू थी उसको बढ़ाकर 31 मई तक कर दिया है। 25 लाख नए किसान क्रेडिट कार्ड की मंजूरी दी है, जिस पर जो ऋण की लिमिट होगी वो 25,000 करोड़ होगी।
Again, one more thing which I'd like to draw your attention before I go to today's announcements. Liquidity support for farmers and for the rural economy has been happening in the last 2 months. I'm referring only to those things which have happened in March, April, which is the COVID duration, the time when COVID hit us and hit us so badly, resulting in a lockdown. But even then, activities through the banks have been happening. I want to just draw your attention that 63 lakh loans of 86,600 crores have been approved in agriculture area between 1st March and 30th of April. Again, refinancing of nearly 29,500 crores has been provided by the NABARD to all the cooperative banks and the regional rural banks so that they can have onward lending done. And this has happened just in March. Just only in March, NABARD has refinanced 29,500 crores through the rural cooperative banks and the regional rural banks. Then again, rural infrastructure, also through a fund which is operated by the NABARD, is the RIDF, which is the Rural Infrastructure Development Fund. Through this, only again in March 2020, a support of 4,200 crores has been provided for rural infrastructure. So rural areas and their infrastructure work is also being provided for in March alone to the extent of 4,200 crores, and that's happened during the COVID period. And finally, state governments do also get working capital assistance, and to the extent of 6,700 crores have been sanctioned for them to procure agricultural produce, which means they can take things from the farmer, they can provide things to the farmer, and when they procure agricultural produce, that money goes into the hands of the farmers themselves. And what is the amount there? 6,700 crore as working capital was sanctioned for state agencies to do the agricultural produce procurement. That again is money going into the hands of the people in the ground, particularly in the rural areas. I'll go over to the urban poor, but before that in Hindi.
कृषि के क्षेत्र में, क्योंकि आपको पता है पिछला सीज़न भी 2 महीने देश के लिए भी और देश के कृषि की अर्थव्यवस्था के लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण था, तो उसके लिए पिछले मार्च और अप्रैल महीने में 63 लाख ऋण मंजूर किए गए, जिसकी लगभग जो अमाउंट है वो 86,600 करोड़ रुपया है, और इससे बल कृषि क्षेत्र को मिला है। विशेष तौर पर किसान के लिए बहुत बड़ी बात है। गांव में कोऑपरेटिव बैंक रूरल रीजनल रूरल बैंक इनकी महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका रहती है और कोऑपरेटिव बैंक और रीजनल रूरल बैंक को मार्च 2020 में नाबार्ड ने 29,500 करोड़ रुपया के रीफाइनेंस का प्रावधान किया है। ग्रामीण क्षेत्र में आधारभूत ढांचे के विकास के लिए 4200 करोड़ रुपए का सहयोग रूरल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट फंड के माध्यम से राज्यों को ये मार्च में राशि उपलब्ध करवाई गई। इसके अलावा जो फसल की खरीद, कृषि उत्पाद की खरीद के लिए 6700 करोड़ रुपए की वर्किंग कैपिटल भी, कार्यशील पूंजी भी राज्यों को उपलब्ध करवाई गई है।
I spoke about the rural areas, rural poor, rural money reaching the hands of the farmers and so on. Now I just very quickly mention about urban poor. In just the last 2 months again, during the COVID period again, what activity has happened to reach out to the urban poor, which includes migrants? Government of India has permitted state governments to utilize State Disaster Response Fund, which goes from the center, for setting up shelter for migrants and providing them food and water. Just rough estimate that I'm giving you, 11,000 crores were sent in that name through the SDRF, with which they run the shelter homes, with which they give them food, with which they take care of them. And that money was also sent from the center. Of course, states do have a right, but that was given. And using that money, many of the migrants have been attended to. So I want that to be kept in context when we talk about attending to the migrants. Again, there are shelter homes which are under the shelter for urban homeless category. That is something which normally is there. But in those shelter for urban homeless, 3 meals are provided entirely at the cost of the central government. So homeless who live in urban areas, particularly in the COVID situation, are getting 3 meals per day. And I'm not saying this as though, oh, we've done this. I'm saying more from the point of view of we are conscious. We are attending to the migrants and we are giving them in various different ways. Food, taking care of them in the shelters, reaching cash to them. All this has been done and therefore I'm enumerating. And did I do this some other time last year? No. I am showing you what has happened in the last 2 months, the critical lockdown period. So in shelter homes, 3 meals are being provided for people who are urban homeless. Now, the other thing, you may recall when the Prime Minister addressed the nation, how India's capacities can be utilized so that we can serve the globe, and how those capacities are lying dormant, and we are the ones who have to give the stimulus, all of us will have to. 12,000 self-help groups all over the country. This is an example which Honorable Prime Minister referred to. 12,000 SHG groups have produced over 3 crore of masks and 1.20 lakh liters of sanitizers, again during this COVID period. And the self-help groups in urban centers are with urban poor. So urban poor are contributing also in this COVID period. And self-help groups, as you know, is something which is supported by the central government also. Another experiment which was successful is for disbursing revolving funds to the SSGs, and these revolving funds for the self-help groups have also become on board a Paisa portal. It is called PA, all in capital, I is small and SA, Paisa portal, as of April. And now many state governments, seeing the pilot project which had happened in Gujarat, want their people also to get onto this, and through this a lot of across the state benefits which they can get will be available for the SHGs. And lastly, for the urban poor, 7,200 new SHG groups have been formed, newly formed for the urban poor. and that commenced from 15th March. Critical COVID time. New self-help groups for whom assistance get given and they get benefit from revolving funds and so on to catch on with what they want to do for their livelihoods. So during these 2 months, COVID period, you have these activities which have happened with central government participating actively in these 2 months only.
प्रवासी मजदूर और शहरी गरीब, ये चर्चा का विषय पिछले कुछ दिनों में भी रहा, लेकिन मैं ये कहना चाहता हूँ, हमारी सरकार ने पिछले वर्षों में भी निकले किया और इस समय में तो विशेष तौर पर हम लोगों ने आपदा राहत के माध्यम से जो फंड, स्टेट डिज़ास्टर रिस्पांस फंड के माध्यम से उपलब्ध, उनको हमने राज्यों को करवाया। ये लगभग 11,000 करोड़ रुपये से ज़्यादा है, ताकि इन लोगों को उसमें से राहत दी जा सके, आपदा राहत हो सके, उसके लिए इस्तेमाल किया गया। और यही नहीं, हाइजीन का ख्याल रखते हुए 3 मील्स एक दिन में प्रति व्यक्ति के लिए इन शेल्टर होम्स में उपलब्ध करवाई गई, ऐसा प्रावधान वहाँ पर करवाया गया। और जो हमारे स्वयं सहायता समूह हैं, जिसको आप सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप्स भी कहते हैं, ऐसे 12,000 स्वयं सहायता समूह ने 3 करोड़ मास्क और 1,20,000 लीटर सैनिटाइज़र्स का उत्पादन किया है। ये एक अपने आप में बहुत बड़ी बात है और इस संकट की घड़ी में हमारे काम और एक बड़ा काम देश के लिए स्वयं सहायता समूह की हमारी बहनों ने किया है। यही नहीं, 7200 नए स्वयं सहायता समूह इस समय में बनकर और शुरू हैं पिछले 2 महीनों में। और जो रिवॉल्विंग फंड सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप के लिए पैसा एक पोर्टल के माध्यम से हमने शुरू किया था गुजरात में पायलट प्रोजेक्ट, अब उसको पूरे देश भर के अलग अलग राज्यों में शुरू किया जाएगा ताकि इनको और लाभ मिल सके। आपको याद होगा कुछ दिन पहले जब हमने घोषणा की थी तो सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप के लिए भी 10 लाख से बढ़ाकर 20 लाख रुपए उसकी लिमिट कर दी थी, तो इससे भी उनकी कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग में मदद मिलेगी।
There's definitely a lot of concern and a legitimate concern about migrant workers now going back to their respective states, and will they be there without any opportunities to earn their livelihood? So I would like to draw your attention to say that you know that we had announced the increase in the average wage rate from 182 to 202 rupees. I had made an announcement once earlier. Now, the question of these people returning to their states, will they stay without any provisioning? We have already generated 14.62 crore man days or person days of work generated up to 13th May, which is actually 40 to 50% more persons who have got enrolled compared to last May. So when there was no COVID, what was the number? It is at least 40 to 50% more than what it was before. We have enrolled all of them. We are making provision through the Rural Development Ministry to ensure that they get enrolled, they get work, they get the due payments. So work offered is now to 2.33 crore wage seekers. I think the data is of yesterday, in about 1.87 lakh gram panchayats. So the migrant workers who are going back, and if in case they are joining the Manrega there, are being actively enrolled and provision through the respective ministries being done, and they are being taken. We've ensured that they're going to be entertained even there. They're not going to be sitting for wanting of some basic work. States and union territories have been advised to provide work to these migrant workers as per the provisions of this Manrega Act. So we are continuing to monitor, and the work during the monsoon will also be actively taken up, whether for plantation, whether for horticulture, whether for livestock related sheds, related building, vagera. So on all of them, these workers who go from here are going to be actively engaged. So I just want that to be made sure. The annual actual expenditure till date is around 10,000 crore. Now, even if it's more, we are making provisioning for that.
जो हमारे प्रवासी मजदूर वापस अपने राज्यों में गए हैं, उनकी भी मदद एमजी नरेगा के माध्यम से कैसे की जाए, उसके लिए भी हम योजना लेकर आए हैं। और अब तक 14 करोड़ 62 लाख % जनरेट किए जा चुके हैं 13 मई तक, और इस पर कुल खर्चा लगभग 10,000 करोड़ के लगभग किया जा चुका है। जो काम ऑफर किया गया है वो 2.33 करोड़ जो काम मांगने वाले हैं उनको कल तक किया गया, और ये लगभग 1,87,000 ग्राम पंचायतों में किया गया है। इसमें 40 से 50% लोगों ने अपनी इनरोलमेंट की है, रजिस्ट्रेशन की है। पिछले साल के मुकाबले, पिछले साल के मई महीने के मुकाबले ज़्यादा लोगों ने की है। यानी कि अगर पिछले साल 100 ने की थी तो इस बार 140 से 150 लोगों ने की है। उस तरह से उसका आंकड़ा लगभग बड़ा है। और एक विशेष मुहिम पूरे ज़िलों में देश भर में चलाई जा रही है कि जो वापस यहाँ से हमारे प्रवासी मजदूर गए, अगर वो चाहें तो वहाँ पर भी अपने आप को रजिस्टर कराकर काम ले सकते हैं। और इसके लिए राज्यों और यूनियन टेरिटरीज़ को निर्देश दे दिए गए हैं। और यही नहीं, 182 रुपया जो उनकी दिहाड़ी होती थी अब उसको बढ़ाकर भी 202 रुपये कर दिया गया है।
Again, before I go over to specifying what programs we have for the second tranche, one quick look at some major reform steps which are in the pipeline. You know, the labor codes related matter is in the parliament. Some reports are also with the standing committee. We are committed to making it better for the workers, and the workers' welfare is top on our agenda. I very will quickly run through some of the points. All this is going to be shared with you in any case, but quickly I will highlight the fact that the minimum wages at the moment is applicable only to 30% of all the workers. We want to make it universal. We want to give that right to minimum wage universally to all workers. So that is one of the major things we are working towards, and as you know, it's all discussed in the parliament. It is getting work is done in the parliament, it is happening there, but I'm giving you some of the highlights. Second is also the regional disparity in minimum wage which exists. We are trying to get over that problem, to get over the disparity which prevails by saying if there can be a national floor wage concept which can be accepted by all the states, so that the disparity which prevails between states of minimum wages can be gotten over. We are also talking about compulsorily giving appointment letters for everybody who is taken in, so that it gets formal, and also making sure annual health checkup is made mandatory for all the employees. Benefits also for workers in the interstate migration of workers, so that nowadays we come to know that workers don't get recruited through an agency or a group, which are normally the groups which bring in unskilled workers. Now employers are directly taking them on, and therefore for that also, coming from various destinations, we want to have a definition of interstate migrant workers. Again, on migrant workers, this will help in defining them better and reaching out benefits to them better. All this is in the parliament. I'm not saying it as a part of this package, but I'm only giving you a clear picture that we are committed towards improving the lot of the workers and making sure that migrant workers and other workers are treated a lot more with their formal benefits reaching them. Portability of welfare benefits is also being contemplated in the parliament for migrant workers. Again, looking at pan-India to all districts, we want to extend the ESIC benefits to all establishments which employ at least 10 people or more, and in some of the notified districts. Looking at also employees, establishment which have less than 10 employees, we want to, at least in a voluntary basis, make sure ESIC can be extended to them on a voluntary basis, because they're very small. We don't want to burden them with anything. The other thing that we're looking at is to make it mandatory to have ESIC coverage through notification by the central government for employees who are working in hazardous industries. Because even if they are small and they don't get included, through a central notification, we want to make sure ESIC coverage is given to all those who are working in smaller units but which are engaging in hazardous activities. They get the benefit of ESIC coverage. And social security schemes are being extended even to gig workers and platform workers. That is now urban phenomena, and they should get that coverage. So we want to bring gig workers into it. We're also looking at reskilling of retrenched workers. Now in the context of COVID, this was all designed before, but in the context of COVID, we probably will have a situation where a lot of retrenched workers will need to have a reskilling exercise. And again, all occupations should be opened for women with night working rights, and also there making sure safeguards are provided for all of them. Provision also for social security funds for unorganized workers, and gratuity to be given for fixed term employment. So these are some of the things which are our commitment, which is revealed in the labor codes. 44 labor different acts have all been now compressed with extensive discussions and consultation. I must appreciate the Ministry of Labor, the Minister, Senior Minister Gangwarji, together with the Secretary, have engaged with all strata, all stakeholders, all strata of workers, to make sure that their concerns are addressed, and therefore the possibility of having those 44 laws being reduced to 4 codes. Highlights I've given you are waiting in the Parliament. Our commitment lies in having them passed after discussing in all the standing committees.
लेबर कोड के माध्यम से हम लोग जहां मज़दूरों को लाभ देने जा रहे हैं, अगर आप देखेंगे तो देश में जो न्यूनतम वेतन है वो लगभग 30% वर्कर्स ही उसका लाभ उठा पाते हैं। समय पर उनका वेतन का भुगतान नहीं हो पाता। अनऑर्गेनाइज जो असंगठित क्षेत्र है उसमें ये दिक्कत है, और इसीलिए यूनिवर्सलाइजेशन की जो बात कही गई है कि न्यूनतम वेतन की यूनिवर्सलाइजेशन की जाएगी, पूरे देश भर में एक जैसा उसका हो, कम से कम एक न्यूनतम वेतन गरीब से गरीब मजदूर को मिले, इसके लिए इस कदम को उठाया गया है। और जो क्षेत्रीय असमानता है, जो रीजनल डिस्पैरिटी है न्यूनतम वेतन में, उसको भी इसके माध्यम से दूर किया जाएगा, वैधानिक रूप इसको दिया जाएगा, और नेशनल फ्लोर वेज इसमें इंट्रोड्यूस की जाएगी। यही नहीं, जो इसको तय करने के तरीके हैं मिनिमम वेजेस, उसको और सरलीकरण इसका किया जाएगा ताकि इसमें कंप्लायंस ज़्यादा हो और रुकावटें कम हो। नियुक्ति पत्र भी सभी मज़दूरों को मिलेंगे, और यही नहीं, साल में एक बार स्वास्थ्य का चेकअप भी होगा, हेल्थ चेकअप भी इनका होगा, और जो खतरनाक क्षेत्र में काम करने वाले, जहाँ खतरा रहता है, ऐसे क्षेत्रों में काम करने वाले जिनके काम करते हैं मज़दूर, उनके लिए ऑक्यूपेशनल सेफ्टी एंड हेल्थ कोड भी लाया जाएगा जो उनकी सुरक्षा और स्वास्थ्य का ख्याल रखेंगे। यही नहीं, पोर्टेबिलिटी जो है वेलफेयर बेनिफिट्स की, ये भी सभी प्रवासी मज़दूरों को मिलेगी, और ESIC का लाभ भी, इसका भी पैन इंडिया पूरे देश भर में इसकी कवरेज सभी ज़िलों में हमारे मज़दूरों को मिल पाएगी। चाहे वो इस्टेब्लिशमेंट जो संस्थान है वो 10 से ज़्यादा वाला है या उतने तक का है, और इसके अलावा मैंडेटरी ESIC कवरेज भी नोटिफिकेशन से माध्यम से सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट ने सभी एम्प्लॉयज़ को जो ऐसे खतरनाक क्षेत्रों में काम करने वाले उनके लिए होगी। सोशल सिक्योरिटी स्कीम भी गिग वर्कर्स के लिए और प्लेटफॉर्म वर्कर्स के लिए मिलेगी। रीस्किलिंग करनी बहुत ज़रूरी हो गई है, क्योंकि जो लोग वापस गए हैं काम करने के लिए, उनको वापस उनको स्किल प्रदान करके वहाँ पर उनका कैसे लाभ मिल सके, रोज़गार मिल सके, इस दिशा में भी काम किए जाएंगे। और सोशल सिक्योरिटी फंड का भी असंगठित क्षेत्र के लिए प्रावधान करने का हम प्रयास करेंगे, प्रोविज़न किया जाएगा। और जो महिलाओं के लिए कामकाज के क्षेत्र खुले हैं, उसमें रात्रि के समय अगर काम करना पड़ता है, ड्यूटी करनी पड़ती है, तो उसमें सेफगार्ड्स अलग अलग तरह के लाए जाएंगे।
Quickly of yesterday's, you know, we've spoken about 3 lakh crore emergency working capital facility. We have also spoken about no global tenders for 200 crore, up to 200 crore for Indian, small companies also to bid for those, and so on. So yesterday's announcement, I thought I'll very quickly give you. I will be providing this one slide. I'm spending not very much of a time on that. I'll move over to talking about one thing there. If you can please go back to the previous slide. One thing there on the tax deduction at source and tax collected at source, where we've reduced the rate by 25%. I will, after the presentation, have Revenue Secretary give you a clear explanation of who it includes and who it doesn't. So the TDS and TCS explanation, you have the Finance Secretary next to me, who is also the Revenue Secretary, who will be able to explain it. But otherwise, that slide will be given to you. So instead of going too much into detail, I just want to highlight the fact the EPF support of paying 24%, the 12% of employer, 12% of the employee is borne by the Government of India. 24% is being borne by the Government of India for the past 3 months, and we have extended that for the next 3 months also. June, July, August is also getting added. This is something which I did mention yesterday. And similarly for others, it has been reduced from 12 to 10% for the employer and the employee. However, the employee will get the 10% for the private, for the government-related public sector undertakings, where the government pays the 12 plus 12.
पिछले कल जो सूक्ष्म लघु और मध्यम उद्योग के लिए घोषणा की गई थी, उसका बड़ा कारण ये भी है, और माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने अपने 12 तारीख के भाषण में कहा भी था कि हमारे लघु मंझोले उद्योग जो हैं, ये जो हमारे MSME हैं, ये करोड़ों लोगों की आजीविका का साधन है, जो आत्मनिर्भर भारत के लिए हमारे संकल्प का मजबूत आधार है। और इसीलिए पिछले कल लाखों करोड़ रुपए का जो बेनिफिट दिए गए, या मैं कहूँगा सहयोग दिया गया। इन लोगों ने कभी मदद नहीं मांगी, सहयोग मांगा, और सहयोग देने का काम कल भारत सरकार ने मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में किया है MSME सेक्टर के लिए। और उसमें ही एक बड़ा सहयोग था। मार्च, अप्रैल, मई महीने में एम्प्लॉय प्रोविडेंट फंड 12% एम्प्लॉय और एम्प्लॉयर का हिस्सा भारत सरकार दे रही है, और अब इसको अगले 3 महीने जून, जुलाई, अगस्त तक और बढ़ा दिया गया है। इसके अलावा जो 12% दोनों को देना पड़ता था काम देने वाले को, अब उसको 10% कर दिया गया है। लेकिन जो भारत सरकार के सेंट्रल PSCs हैं, वो अपना 12% ही देंगे।
I go over to today's announcements. I said there are three steps that we want to explain about the migrants. The first thing relates to free food grain. Free food grain supply to all migrants for the next 2 months. How is this? You're aware, we had already announced that for the public distribution system-based, card-based people who get their regular quota of rice or wheat and in their residences, we had added free 35 kgs for them, either of rice or wheat, and also said 5 kgs per individual, but per card 1 kg of pulse was announced earlier. And that additional 5 per month kg of wheat or rice was being given free. That was made clear. Now what we are saying is that continues, that remains intact. But for those who are non-card holders, meaning they are neither under the National Food Security Act, nor are they holders of any state-level cards, for them, they shall be given 5 kgs per person of wheat or rice, or 1 kg of chana, so that is for per family. And if the person is remaining without card, he can also get it. We are engaging with the state governments to make sure that they know where these migrants are, they can approach them and give them, because most of these migrants who have no cards are staying in those camps which are being run either by the government or by the NGOs, and therefore, based on a rough assessment which has been given to us by all the state governments, we think there are about 8 crore migrants for whom benefit will reach through this free food grain supply. The central government will take the cost and they will not be charged. 3,500 crores will be spent on this intervention within the next 2 months. So I know migrants are also moving out, either they're going back, very few are coming back. Irrespective, we are saying for the next 2 months, they shall get free rice or wheat and also 1 kg per card, per family. Without card also, you can get your rice, wheat or wheat or chenna. So this will reach through the state governments. State governments will be implementing agencies. They will identify the migrants. They will take care of the full distribution and they will provide the details. The initial assessment is what I've told you. The numbers may change depending on how the state governments are going to. We've made provision for this many. That's exactly what I want to convey.
प्रवासी मजदूर जो भारत और मैं कहूँगा राष्ट्र निर्माण में लगे हैं, उनके लिए राशन की सुविधा उपलब्ध करवाने के लिए ऐसे 8 करोड़ प्रवासी मजदूरों के लिए 3500 करोड़ रुपए का प्रावधान मोदी सरकार करवाने जा रही है। जो नेशनल फूड सिक्योरिटी एक्ट में नहीं आते या जिनको राज्यों का राशन कार्ड नहीं मिल पाता या उसकी बेनिफिशियरीज लिस्ट में नहीं है, वो भी इससे वंचित ना रह जाएं। ऐसे 8 करोड़ प्रवासी मजदूरों के लिए 3500 करोड़ रुपए का प्रावधान, यानी कि उनको 5-5 किलो गेहूं या चावल मिलेंगे और साथ में 1 किलो चना, प्रति फैमिली 1 किलो चना और प्रति व्यक्ति 5 किलो गेहूं और चावल भी अगले 2 महीनों तक मिलते रहेंगे। इसके लिए मोदी सरकार 3500 करोड़ रुपए का प्रावधान कर रही है। इसको लागू करने की जिम्मेदारी राज्य सरकारों की है।
The next point is, I go back to referring to the Prime Minister's address to the nation where he said 5 pillars, and one of them is talking about technology-driven systems. This is one classic example for that, where in order to benefit migrant workers, we are coming up with a national portability of the cards, which is public distribution ration cards can be used in any ration card, any ration shop in any part of the country as you move along. So if there is a ration card holder, today he's in Bihar or Karnataka, tomorrow he moves to Rajasthan, he can take his food ration from any ration shop in that state. So national portability, which is now being defined as one nation, one ration card. One nation, one ration card will be implemented, and by August 2020, which is another 3 months, within 3 months, 67 crore beneficiaries in 23 states, which means the 67 crore beneficiary is 83% of all the PDS population that we are talking about. 83% of all the PDS population will get covered by this one nation, one ration card. And we assure 100% coverage of national portability of these cards by March 2021. 83% is already done. So all the states and union territories will complete full FPS automation by March 2021.
आज के समय में अगर देखा जाए तो जो प्रवासी मजदूर था उसको सबसे बड़ा संकट आया, लेकिन टेक्नोलॉजी के माध्यम से आने वाले समय में उनको कभी भगवान ना करे कोविड-19 जैसी स्थिति ना आए, लेकिन अगर कुछ भी होता है, स्थिति ना भी आए, वैसे भी चले, तब भी वो देश के किसी कोने में हो, वो कहीं पर भी अपने राशन कार्ड का इस्तेमाल कर सकें। वन नेशन वन राशन कार्ड, ये योजना हम लाने वाले हैं और इसके माध्यम से आप देश के किसी कोने में भी किसी भी उचित मूल्य की दुकान से अपना राशन ले सकते हैं, जिसको हम डिपो भी कहते हैं, राशन डिपो भी कहते हैं, ताकि राशन वितरण प्रणाली से जो आपके हिस्से का आप उसको ले पाएँ। और इसका अगर देखा जाए तो आज तक टेक्नोलॉजी के उपयोग से, चाहे वो जनधन खाते हों, आधार नंबर हो, मोबाइल हो, इसके माध्यम से पारदर्शिता मोदी सरकार लेकर आई और लाखों करोड़ पिछले कुछ वर्षों में बचाया भी है और वापस गरीबों के उत्थान के लिए लगाया। तो इससे भी जहां गरीब को लाभ मिलेगा देश के किसी कोने में राशन लेने के लिए, वहीं पर देखा जाए तो 23 राज्यों में 67 करोड़ बेनिफिशरी जो हैं वो 83% पीडीएस की पॉपुलेशन वो अब तक इस पे कवर हो चुकी है और मार्च 2021 तक हम 100% उसको कवर कर लेंगे नेशनल पोर्टेबिलिटी में, ताकि वो देश के किसी कोने में जाकर भी अपने राशन कार्ड का इस्तेमाल कर सकें। ये अपने आप में क्रांतिकारी कदम गरीब मजदूर, प्रवासी मजदूर के लिए होगा कि वो देश के किसी भी कोने में जाकर अपने हक का राशन किसी भी राशन डिपो से ले सकता है, ऐसा उसके लिए सुविधा होगी।
The last step for the migrant workers, we spoke about their food, their ration, portability of their ration. Now I'm talking about affordable rental accommodation for the migrant workers or the urban poor. Government has plans to launch, and very quickly it shall launch under the PM Awas Yojana for the migrant labor and urban poor, a particular scheme of affordable rental housing scheme, whereby we have 3 different ways in which we want to achieve it. We are asking incentivizing manufacturing units, industries, institutions and associations to, on their private land, build and develop affordable rental housing complexes. And we are also converting a lot of government-funded housings in major cities which are remaining vacant into affordable rental housing accommodation. They can become affordable rental housing complexes, and this shall be done on a PPP mode through concessionaire agreements, through which they can invest somewhat some money to keep it up and also somewhat some money to make it ready, and then derive the rental, like the way the roads have, the toll little collections. Similarly, here they can collect small amount of rent and make some arrangement. Incentivizing also state governments to do the same. Central government organizations will also undertake in similar lines. The detailed guidelines will come from the ministry sooner. So urban migrants, urban poor now can look forward to having at least some basic rental accommodation for themselves.
प्रवासी मजदूर और शहरी गरीब के लिए जहाँ वो काम करते हैं शहरों में, वहाँ पर कम कीमत पर उनको किराए पर मकान मिल पाएँ, रहने की सुविधा मिल पाए, इस बड़ी योजना का संकल्प लेकर मोदी जी आए हैं। और मेरा मानना है कि जिस तरह से हर घर को बिजली, हर गांव तक बिजली पहुंचाने का काम, हर व्यक्ति का बैंक खाता खोलने का काम, हर बहन को गैस सिलेंडर देने का काम और 2022 तक हर गरीब को सर ढकने के लिए छत देने का काम मोदी सरकार करने वाली है, उसी तरह से एक बहुत बड़ी योजना ये भी है कि कम कीमत वाले, कम किराए वाले ऐसे घर आने वाले समय में मिलेंगे और जिसका प्रधानमंत्री आवास योजना के अंतर्गत इस योजना को लाया जाएगा, जो कि हमारे अब के बने हुए घरों को भी उसमें इंक्लूड कर सकती है, जो सरकार के अभी बने और कुछ जगह खाली होंगे। उद्योगपति अपनी ज़मीन पर बनाना चाहें तो उनको भी इंसेंटिवाइज करके करेंगे, ताकि वो भी अपने काम करने वाली मजदूरों के लिए अपनी फैक्ट्री या उसके आसपास रहने की व्यवस्था बनाएं, या राज्य की सरकारों को, उनकी एजेंसियों को हम लोग प्रेरित करेंगे, लाभ देंगे, ताकि वो भी अपने राज्य में काम करने वाले ऐसे मजदूरों के लिए सुविधाएं तैयार करके दें।
I move over to the Sishu loans of Mudra. This is a way in which we are going to help the smallest of small credit takers from the banks, where after the RBI giving 3 months moratorium, when they come back to have to pay the interest, the EMI, they will have a little problem, and we want to support them with some interest subvention. Incentive being, if you pay in time promptly, you get the 2% incentive, interest subvention incentive. So the current portfolio of Mudra Sishu loans. You know, Mudra has 3 different types of loans. The Sishu is up to 50,000 is what they take as loan, only 50,000 rupees or less. People who have taken loans 50,000 or lesser, after the 3-month moratorium, when they come back to paying the EMIs, will have for the next 12 months an interest subvention support which will be of 2%, and that support will entail a total relief of 1,500 crores, which is for all the Sishu loan holders. Now, I just want to give you a broad indication of number. I don't think it's possible for me to straight away tell you the exact number, but I can indicate to you, because up to 50,000 will mean some people will have 10,000, some might have 15,000, some others might have 20. So actually, to get the actual number of beneficiaries, I might need a little more time, but roughly, if this outstanding is 1.62 lakh crores, if the outstanding, total outstanding of Sishu loans under the Mudra category is 1.62 lakh crores, and on the assumption that all of them have taken 50,000, the maximum limit, it will be something like 3 crore, more than 3 crore people. And therefore, if this 3 crore is a conservative estimate, it can be slightly more than that. It will benefit. This 2% interest subvention will benefit about 3 crore people who are beneficiaries of the Mudra Sishu loan. I'm not talking of all the 3 categories, only the Sishu category, which means 50,000 or less loans.
जो मुद्रा शिशु ऋण श्रेणी में लोग आते हैं, उनके लिए 1500 करोड़ रुपए की जो ब्याज में राहत देने की योजना मोदी सरकार लाई है, ताकि गरीब से गरीब व्यक्ति को उसका लाभ मिल सके। 1,62,000 करोड़ रुपया आज तक इस मुद्रा शिशु लोन के अंतर्गत दिया है, जो आउटस्टैंडिंग है, और इस योजना के माध्यम से लगभग 3 करोड़ ऐसे लोगों को लाभ मिलने वाला है, और ये कुल लाभ 1500 करोड़ रुपए के लगभग होगा। जो देश भर में मुद्रा शिशु लोन वाले हैं, उनको 1500 करोड़ रुपए का लाभ इस योजना के माध्यम से मोदी सरकार देगी, कि उनके ब्याज में 2% की राहत, छूट नरेंद्र मोदी जी की सरकार वहन करेगी, यानी कि मोदी सरकार उसका खर्चा उठाएगी और गरीब को राहत देगी।
The next step is towards street vendors, for whom we are giving a special credit facility for about 5,000 crores of rupees. This is going to be because most of their livelihood has been adversely affected. Street vendors have not been allowed to do anything during the lockdown, and therefore within a month the government will launch the special scheme, which will facilitate easy access to credit for all the street vendors. And when I say all the street vendors, there are 50 lakh street vendors as per one estimation which comes from all the state governments. 50 lakh street vendors will be able to avail of the 5,000 crore special credit facility, through which once the lockdown is lifted, they can start their business back, they can buy their products to sell, and so on. So 50 lakh street vendors will be taken care of. We are giving an initial working capital of up to 10,000 rupees. And for this, we expect a liquidity provision of 5,000 crores will be made by the government.
तो जहाँ एक और श्रमिक और प्रवासी मजदूरों के साथ साथ रेडी लगाने वाले, पटरी पर सामान बेचने वाले जो हमारे श्रमिक साथी हैं, जो घरों में काम करने वाले भाई बहन हैं, जो ठेला लगाने वाले हैं, इन सबको कोविड-19 के समय इस पिछले 2 महीनों में बहुत सारी तकलीफ़ का सामना करना पड़ा, और इन्होंने बहुत ज़्यादा त्याग भी इसके लिए किया है। और ये 5,000 करोड़ रुपए की विशेष सुविधा केवल इनके लिए, रेहड़ी ठेला लगाने वाले, पटरी पर सामान बेचने वाले श्रमिक साथी, इनके लिए लेकर आए हैं। ये 10,000 की इनको प्रति व्यक्ति सुविधा मिल सकती है, क्योंकि किसी को चाय बेचनी है, सब्जी बेचनी, कुछ और बेचना है, तो 2,000 10,000 तक वो अपना सामान लेने की उसको सुविधा मिल सकती है। और ये 1 महीने के अंदर सरकार इसको लॉन्च कर देगी। और जो मोबाइल से पेमेंट करेगा, डिजिटल पेमेंट करेगा, उसको इसके ऊपर इनाम भी मिलेंगे। और यही नहीं, डिजिटल पेमेंट्स का एक लाभ उनको और मिलेगा कि उनको आने वाले समय में 10,000 के बजाय ज़्यादा पैसा मिल सके, क्योंकि उनका व्यापार लेखा जोखा ध्यान में आएगा तो बैंक भी उनको ज़्यादा पैसे देने के लिए तैयार होंगे। तो डिजिटल पेमेंट को भी इससे बल मिलेगा और लोगों को भी आने वाले समय में अतिरिक्त धन उपलब्ध कराया जा सकता है अपना कामकाज बढ़ाने के लिए। जैसे कल हमने एमएसएमई की केवल डेफिनेशन चेंज की, लेकिन उसका इतना बड़ा इम्पैक्ट है कि लोग अपना कारोबार बढ़ा सकते हैं। यहाँ पर भी डिजिटल पेमेंट से इतना बड़ा बल मिल सकता है कि लोगों को आने वाले समय में कर्ज ज़्यादा मिल सकता है और अपना व्यापार बढ़ा सकते हैं। ऐसे लगभग 50 लाख सड़कों पर, रेहड़ी पर, फड़ी पर काम करने वाले, ठेले पर बेचने वाले लोगों को, घरों में काम करने वाले लोगों को लाभ मिलेगा। और 5,000 करोड़ रुपए की सुविधा केवल ये श्रमिक, हमारे पटरी पर काम करने वाले ठेले और रेहड़ी वालों के लिए किसी ने की है तो नरेंद्र मोदी जी की सरकार ने इसमें दी है।
I move to the next, which is generation of, we've gone to the housing.
ये कर दिया।
There is a program, that's fine. We wish to give the middle income group, and that too the lowest strata of the middle income group, who get only 6 lakhs to 18 lakhs annual income. So they are probably above poverty line, all right, and slightly over that, but clearly the middle class, the lowest rung of middle class, who are up to 6 to 18 lakhs only annual income. For them, there is a credit-linked subsidy scheme which was introduced by Government of India in May 2017. This was operationalized from 17, but it was extended only up to 31st March 2020. This scheme benefits a lot of people who want to have simple, affordable houses. So this scheme, which is credit-linked subsidy scheme, is being extended up to March 2021. Government will extend this scheme, and we think over and above over 3.3 lakh crores of 3.3 lakh families which benefited till now, 3.3 lakh families which benefited till now will now additionally have another 2.5 lakh middle income families which will join in by this 1-year extension that we are offering. That scheme, which started in 2017, was to end in March 2020. We are extending it by 1 more year till March 2021. And we think in this 1 year, another 2.5 lakh people will benefit from this so that they can have affordable houses for themselves. Under this particular scheme, credit-linked subsidy scheme. By doing this, we think we'll immediately be able to spur jobs creation. Immediately the demand for steel, cement, and also transportation, heavy-duty transportation, will all improve. And construction materials will also come to be demanded. And therefore, this will have immediate impact on the demand side of the
हाउसिंग सेक्टर को बढ़ावा देने के लिए जो मिडिल इनकम ग्रुप है, जिनकी आय 6 लाख से 18 लाख तक की है, उनके लिए 70,000 करोड़ का बढ़ावा देने वाली ऐसी योजना हम लेकर आए हैं, जिससे 6 लाख से 18 लाख की आय वालों को हाउसिंग सेक्टर में लाभ मिलेगा। ये 70,000 करोड़ का बढ़ावा देने वाली योजना है, जो क्रेडिट लिंक सब्सिडी स्कीम जो 31 मार्च 2020 तक हमने एक्सटेंड की थी, जिसका लाभ 3.3 यानी कि 3,30,000 के लगभग मध्यम वर्ग के परिवारों को हुआ था। अब इस योजना को 31 मार्च 2021 तक बढ़ा दिया गया है और इससे लगभग 2.5 लाख से ज़्यादा मध्यम वर्ग के परिवारों को लाभ मिलेगा और 70,000 करोड़ रुपए का इसमें कुल मिलाकर इन्वेस्टमेंट आएगी, जिससे स्टील, सीमेंट, ऐसे मटेरियल से जुड़े हुए, आपके रियल एस्टेट से जुड़े हुए, हाउसिंग से जुड़े हुए सेक्टर्स को भी बढ़ावा मिलेगा। तो लाखों लोगों को मजदूरी के अवसर भी मिलेंगे, तो मजदूरों को भी लाभ मिलेगा और इन सेक्टर्स को लाभ भी मिलेगा, और गरीब के ऊपर वाली श्रेणी जो है मध्यम वर्ग की, उसको घरों का लाभ भी मिल पाएगा।
I go over to talking about employment creation. Here, we are talking about the Campa funds, about which all of us know. We are not creating a new scheme or anything, but these Campa funds, which have been lying in various states, have now been given a push. 6,000 crore rupees worth projects have already come, proposals have come from states. They're getting approved in the next 10 days. What it shall do for tribals and Adivasis, it will generate employment, because this 6,000 crores proposals which have come from the various states speak of employing people, particularly the tribal and the Adivasi people, for afforestation and plantation related works, for artificial regeneration and also for assisted natural regeneration, and forest management, forest protection, forest wildlife related infrastructure development, wildlife protection and management, and so on. So this is something which the states have actively come forward with proposals which are only about 6,000 crores now, but we have understood from them many more such proposals are waited, and that shall immediately create a lot of jobs. Considering that monsoon is fast approaching, this is the time when all these, vriksharopan and other things happen. And therefore, this scheme is given a special push so that the tribals and Adivasis will have some money in their hands by joining in these work. Somewhat to an extent, some states also want to extend it to semi-urban areas and utilize this fund. That is something which the central government and the Environment Ministry will take care of addressing it. So semi-urban and partly fringes of urban areas, if they want to use it, it's up to the states and the Environment Ministry. But largely, this is going to generate employment for the tribals and Adivasis, for forestry related work and forest infrastructure related work, 6,000 crore to start with.
रोजगार के और अवसर पैदा हों, और विशेष तौर पर आदिवासी इलाकों में, ट्राइबल एरियाज़ में हो, ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों में हो, तो 6,000 करोड़ के कैंपा फंड्स का सदुपयोग और रोजगार के अवसर पैदा करने के लिए किया जाएगा, जिसमें वृक्षारोपण हो, वनीकरण हो। इस तरह से उस योजनाओं का लाभ आप अलग अलग क्षेत्रों में उठा सकते हैं, विशेष तौर पर ट्राइबल एरियाज़ में, आदिवासी क्षेत्रों में, और इसके अलावा चाहे शहरी, अर्ध शहरी क्षेत्र हो, ग्रामीण क्षेत्र हो, यहाँ पर भी आप इन योजनाओं को ला सकते हैं।
The last two for today relate to farmers. We are providing a 30,000 crore, actually a 30,000 crore additional emergency working capital fund through the NABARD. And this is essentially a refinance support which the NABARD gives. You may ask me if it is something which is new. NABARD does this already. Yes, it does. 90,000 crore is annually the average they spend on this. We are now putting an additional 30,000 crore. This additional 30,000 crore will be immediately released so that the post-harvest Rabi work which is going on. Rabi, almost all the states have reported their harvests are over. Many states have successfully even close to completing the procurement of produce. This also happened in many states. But immediately post-harvest, if there are any requirements for post-harvest Rabi-related work, this money will go and help the farmers, the small and the marginal farmers. This is for particularly small and marginal farmers. And not only post-harvest Rabi, but also the preparatory work for Kharif. Even for that, this will be of help. The regional rural banks and the rural cooperative banks will be the ones which will use this credit. many of the state cooperative banks, about 33 state cooperative banks, 351 district cooperative banks, and 43 regional rural banks have also come forward to avail of this on-tap based lending. So it will be directly reaching rural India, directly reaching small and marginal farmers, and this is 30,000 crore in addition to what they normally do, which is 90,000 crore. This will benefit 3 crore farmers.
जहां पहले केंद्र सरकार ने राज्यों को फसल की खरीद के लिए पैसा दिया, जिसकी जानकारी हमने पहले दी, उसके अलावा अगर कहा जाए तो कृषि के सीज़न में किसानों ने बहुत मेहनत की और बहुत सफलता के साथ अच्छा उत्पादन भी किया और कोई नुकसान कृषि के क्षेत्र में नहीं होने दिया, ऐसा प्रयास किए गए। लेकिन हमारे छोटे और सीमांत किसान जो हैं, उनको लाभ देने के लिए ऐसे 3 करोड़ छोटे और सीमांत किसानों के लिए 30,000 करोड़ रुपए की अतिरिक्त सुविधा नरेंद्र मोदी जी की सरकार लेकर आई है। और ये 30,000 करोड़ 90,000 करोड़ जो नाबार्ड देता है उसके अतिरिक्त है, और ये सारा पैसा स्टेट कोऑपरेटिव बैंक, डिस्ट्रिक्ट कोऑपरेटिव बैंक, रीजनल रूरल बैंक, इनके माध्यम से राज्यों को दिया जाएगा और इसका वितरण वहाँ पर किया जाएगा ताकि छोटे और सीमांत किसानों को इसका लाभ मिल सके।
The last that I would want to tell you is absolutely critical because it brings a newer dimension to some of the things which have been happening. I am referring to the Kisan credit card. Nearly 2 lakh crores of concessional credit will be extended to boost the farming activities. 2.5 crore farmers will get the benefit, and this special drive will include these 2.5 crore farmers who don't have at the moment the Kisan credit card, because a rough estimate is if there were 9 crores of PM Kisan Samman award receivers, of that about 2.5 crore farmers do not have Kisan credit card. Now we are reaching them and giving them the Kisan credit card. But more importantly, something which the Honorable Prime Minister has been referring to, he has referred to in 2-3 of his speeches, that fishermen and animal husbandry farmers also shall be included in the Kisan credit cards. And therefore, they will also be able to avail of this concessional credit boost that we are giving to the extent of 2 lakh crores. This will enable all the farmers to gain access to institutional credit at concessional rate. 2.5 crore is the farmer number that I've given you who will be covered, and in this I'm not giving a specific number, but animal husbandry and Matsyakar will all be added. Fishermen will also be added.
जहाँ एक और कई योजनाएं PM किसान, जहाँ 6,000 रुपया करोड़ों किसानों के खाते में जाता है, या सॉयल हेल्थ कार्ड हो, बाकी योजनाएं मोदी जी ने चलाई, वहीं पर अब एक 2 लाख करोड़ रुपए की सुविधा कंसेशनल क्रेडिट को बढ़ावा देते हुए ये 2.5 करोड़ जो किसान हैं उनको इसका लाभ मिलेगा। ये किसान क्रेडिट कार्ड के माध्यम से मिलेगा। एक विशेष अभियान इसके लिए चलाया जाएगा और इसके माध्यम से रियायती दर पर ऋण इनके लिए उपलब्ध होगा, और लगभग जैसा मैंने कहा कि 2.5 करोड़ किसानों को 2 लाख करोड़ रुपए की सुविधा मिलेगी, और इसमें किसानों के साथ साथ मछुआरों को, पशुपालकों को, इनको भी इसमें लाभ मिलेगा और इससे उनके आय के साधन भी बढ़ेंगे।
Today's presentation is for the second tranche is now over. I just want to highlight the fact that in these days of part of full lockdown, media, all of you all have been keen. You've been attending all our press conferences, hearing the Prime Minister. You've really been a catalyst in the stimulus giving exercise. So I thank all of you all, which the Honorable MOS did mention even at the start. We certainly look forward to having you pass all this information, disseminate this information, Spread this information so that people get to know what this government is doing. So even as we are looking at COVID as an opportunity, not look at COVID as, oh my God, my economy. No, yes, there are people suffering. Yes, we notice a lot of people undergoing severe, constraints. They are walking back to their homes. Prime Minister had requested, please stay wherever you are. But nevertheless, emotions being what they are, and their concerns being what they are, we understand migrants moving. We will have to extend all benefits, and that's what we are trying to do. And therefore, in this entire COVID-related response, I thank the media for constantly keeping every concern heard both ways, from the citizen to the government, and from the government, the stimuluses and other things that we want to do to the people back. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. We take some questions now from you. Number 14.
Well, there you go. That's the second press conference by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and the Minister of State Anurag Thakur. A whole host of measures in the economic package. We're going to be going into all of them, analyzing them with the best of economists, policymakers, as well as industry bigwigs. But before that, ladies and gentlemen, we got a big interview lined up for you. Here is my managing editor, Nikunj Danvia, in conversation with Nicholas Nassim Taleb, renowned author. He's, of course, written that famous book, Black Swan and Skin in the Game. Here's that conversation.
The Federal Reserve has lost one weapon, interest rates, because at zero you can't really go negative. There's arbitrages, but they have the monetary policy arm is not just lowering rates. They can print money to buy your commercial paper. Okay, the commercial paper of a Maltese bank in New York, they buy it. Anything they see that's on sale, they buy. So that definitely will prop up the stock market for a while. But remember, okay, nothing is permanent, okay? When they stop buying, or if they realize that what they're doing may be inflationary, okay, then things go back to normal. So the one thing I've learned in the life of 37 years since I started trading, very counterintuitive, is that recessions are very good for stocks because the reaction to recessions make stocks rally, and booms are very, 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 very bad. They make stocks very volatile because, of course, they're going to raise rates and people have substitutions into bonds. So this is one of the reasons why stocks are not collapsing. But if outside the stock market, okay, which which is investor-led, by people who just put money but not work. If you walk around, you see nothing but businesses closed. So you have entire sector that will not come back. So number one, rotation from sectors like real estate will do very poorly in the office building, okay, and of course in retail, because people are buying now on Amazon, will do poorly. Other industries doing well, and over time the economy overall will adapt to that. Will adapt in the sense that I'm adapted. Look, I'm a professor. I have a studio now in my home where I have a blackboard to lecture on a blackboard. I'm adapted, and it's actually a lot cheaper for universities or for conferences to take place online. Okay, you don't have to fly people in. You don't have to clean the offices. You don't have to, provide food. Everything's much more convenient, and you're cutting down on commuting time for a lot of employees. So I am adapted in that sense, and I mean, I hope for the best, but if it doesn't happen, I am adapted. A lot of farmers also are adapting. So we have an adaptation period. It seems to me that within 2 or 3 months we'll be so adapted to this that some people will thrive and will even regret normalcy. But I don't think we will have normalcy for one reason. Unless there's a miracle cure, and we know what happens with miracle cures. You have, they make the front page of, at a time there was a rule: if a cure makes the front page of Newsweek, it's not a cure, right? That was the rule in 30 years ago. So like interferon, cure for all viruses, no, okay. So even if we have a cure, of course, people will wait for side effects, failures, maybe a vaccine that doesn't really adapt to new mutations of the virus. So even if we have a cure, people will still be paranoid, okay, and will not gather in bars unless, I mean, we're talking about young people maybe, but reasonable people will not gather in bars, will not go to crowded places, will not get into crowded elevators, will not go to crowded, if they have the chance. And it looks like they have the chance, you see. And even the restaurant business can adapt. Like I'm now in Atlanta as a refugee, but I have a place here and I'm enjoying it. And I've noticed that there are restaurants that are entirely outdoors. And these can thrive in this new environment with a proper distancing and ventilation, okay? But of course, you can't do that in the middle of the winter in New York. So there'll be losers, permanent losers, even if we have a semi-cure for the virus, or announcement for a cure. It will take a long time for people to really believe that it's risk-free to go to crowded places.
India has so far managed to contain the virus. On the medical front, the lockdown has been a success. But do you think in the medium term and the short term, this lockdown is going to cost Indian economy a lot?
I think that it's a false economy again. It's a false economy. Maybe the money you've saved from a short lockdown, you see, when you have a short lockdown, you save money for later, okay? Compared to, think about New York, think about the United States. Because although even we don't have a lockdown, there's a drop in economic activity and we're prolonging the effect of the disease. So I think that India had a very reasonable policy. India, Taiwan, Hong Kong, New Zealand, Australia, these many countries had very reasonable policy. They acted early, they acted wisely, they acted according to precautionary principles, and they had a morally acceptable stance. And let me talk about, if you don't mind, about my moral stance. Saying we're going to sacrifice the elderly because, you know what, we don't need them anymore, is something that would not cross any mind outside Sweden or some countries, some rich countries. Okay, so what we call geronticide, killing the elderly, by saying this disease doesn't affect the young, which is actually bad reasoning because we know that disease also affects many young. Okay, and we don't know, as I said, the long-term effect. But seeing these stances, okay, that they're morally not acceptable to many cultures, and including the Indian culture where you have respect for the elderly. You see, they're not accepted by Mediterranean culture, because for the Romans, senatus means the older person. This is why they had the Senate. The Senate is the council of the elders. Okay, so not only you wouldn't kill the elders, but they had a prominence. And the Arabic word shaykh, what does it mean? It means older. So seniority in age was effectively social seniority, intellectual seniority, and political seniority. So what we're facing here is a divide that few are noticing between the two worlds. Okay, the world that has the ancient world imbued with ancient values, and a new world that succeeded economically over the past, say, 75 years, okay? And now we're seeing that maybe their moral advancement is not there, and that's gonna cost them. And even then, now Sweden, for our friends here who don't know the story, has decided to let the thing go. Okay, they say, okay, it will burn through the population, it will kill a few people, and then the young will not be affected, which is turning out to be a very bad idea because many young are affected. We don't know if something they call herd immunity works. We don't have no idea. And what is worse is that their economy is also suffering. You see, this is the poetic justice. Is not only they're killing the old people, but their economy is also suffering. So this is why, I mean, so sometimes people put you in front of a dilemma. Okay, this is a cost-benefit analysis, and a lot of countries, including India, including countries in the Southeast of Asia, countries in the Middle East and the Mediterranean, would refuse that on moral grounds.
Before I get into India's specific question and we start talking about risk, as a statistician, I'm sure you've studied viruses and the history. This virus has seen a winter and a summer. It has survived. Monsoon is about to come. It has only started in Japan and parts of China. Do you think the virus could spread more, or it could be normal?
Okay, we don't know. The idea, you see, let's look at the reasoning on why we're talking about pseudo experts. That we've discovered, my friends and I, we study macro things, okay, macro properties. I just have a paper coming this week in either this week, next week in Nature Physics on what we call the fat tails of pandemics, which is effectively what drove me to write that comment that you nicely put in the Black Swan. I mean, the comment in Black Swan that I nicely mentioned. That was driven by some kind of, anecdotal empiricism I did that we formalize now with Nature Physics. You look at the macro property, the systemic effect, not you don't go from a micro to the macro, you go from macro properties to micro decisions. So it turns out that people involved in medicine were too myopic to understand that maybe it's not the thing you have. Whereas when you look at macro, you're much more skeptical about claims. So in the beginning, they thought it was like SARS. And on January 26th, when we issued our warning, we said, maybe it's like SARS. Okay, we're all okay. Maybe it's not, okay? So now there are a lot of things saying maybe it's not. So the claims were initially that don't worry about it. Wuhan, that was in January, has a harsh winter. Look at on TV, all their hats and stuff, therefore, countries that are warm don't have that. And effectively, the influenza, okay, and people thought, oh, just another flu, maybe a little worse, but within the same category. So they had a category error. So they thought that viruses, okay, this class of viruses, for some reason, okay, do not like summers. Either because more people are outside, or maybe because the nature of the virus doesn't survive on surfaces, whatever. And then they had a lot of theories. And then we said, you can't, okay, because we still don't know enough to make these assumptions. When you model, you had to look at the macro properties that are robust and common to all diseases. And the more you know, the more you can narrow it to the category and say, oh, less harmful than, but here we still don't know in the absence of information. Okay, and we still have no information. We still do not know anything. I mean, people were not recommending masks till recently, when in fact masks would have saved the US economy, you see. So even the President Trump doesn't use masks, but they realized that from the beginning, okay, they thought that like some other viruses, it was transmitted by contact, not via aerosol or droplets in the air. And it's turning out not to be true. And masks are incredibly effective, okay, for things that are respiratory because it's filter on both sides, okay, and compounding the filter works very well. After 2 or 3 persons, you can pretty much lower the transmission. Anyway, so what I'm saying, so to summarize, we cannot make assumptions of seasonality before seeing a lot of seasons. Okay, so I would stay on a maximal alert. I would hope, that, summers would high temperatures, humidity will harm it. But in the meanwhile, I would wait.
Okay, now before I shift focus to risk and asset allocation, I'm going to just read off for everyone in the webinar one quote of Mr. Talib. people have the problem of denial. This is one of the biggest things I have learned in the Lebanon. Everyone who left Beirut, when the war started, including my parents, said, oh, this will last 2 weeks. It lasted 17 years. I guess that is what he's trying to refer to this virus. Please don't be in a denial mode. Learn to live with reality that virus is here. Like he told us a couple of days ago, plague lasted for more than 200 years. So I'm going to just shift focus, Mr. Taleb, and talk about what should one do. You're a risk taker, right? You are a trader. Yes. Let's understand by where are you investing and how are you investing personally?
Okay. Yes, in Skin in the Game, I said that I will never recommend anything that I don't have myself out of for moral reason. That way, if my recommendation is wrong, I lose money. It's good. I'll have good conscience. I hate gold. I've always hated gold. Unfortunately, I own gold. Okay. I hate European currency. Unfortunately, I own some European currencies. I like land. Okay, so I own land. I own olive trees. It's not economical for now, but I feel comfortable. Why? I feel it's a good repository of value. So now let me tell you what's driving my thing. I have two fears. Okay, one fear is of deflation and one fear of inflation. And I've learned through history that there's no such thing as inflation anymore. Okay, there's hyperinflation or nothing. Okay, so now we are in a deflationary environment. Okay, not for some things. Okay, but typically you can feel a deflation. It can switch very easily because it's throwing so much money at it into something very. So I want to hedge to make sure my funds, my savings, that they are unaffected by both deflation or hyperinflation. Okay, so I have a large portion in things that for paranoia. I am making bets. Odds are I will lose on them, but they're hugely protective bets against long-term bond rates, because I think that eventually, if they keep at some point, even the government of the United States, you see, if the Chinese stop buying bonds, okay, the Arabs stop buying bonds, even the government of the United States may not be able to issue bonds to pay for this. Okay, so you cannot just have the Federal Reserve buy your bonds. Okay, it becomes sort of so circular. So, and I have, of course, what we call tail risk hedge, and I would like phase two to invest in some businesses that are both robust to recovery from this and robust to the virus. You see, some companies may not be robust to the recovery, like, for example, delivery services. Okay, a lot of people may not be, these are booming. Where I live, you have food delivered, stuff delivered. So Amazon may suffer a little, okay, if you have normalcy, but there are some businesses where I think, like what we're doing now, Zoom or some other, they may gain, because we've discovered a new way of doing business, and a lot of employees would like to stay home independent of the virus, simply because they find it more effective to not commute. Some people commute for 3 hours to New York City. So there's some habits that would be permanent. So try to identify companies that are robust to both the recovery and boom during the virus. Then, and as you said, I would hope that this will last 2 more weeks, but I will act as if it's going to be 17 years. So there's a difference between what you hope and how you act.
If I increase the time frame, which is terminal, a lot of experts use that. Let's look at terminal investing. 1 year, 5 year, and 10 year. Would you still like to buy gold in every basket?
Okay, so let me tell you one thing that one dogma I have. You should invest for tomorrow, and you invest for 100 years in exactly the same way. And let me make an anecdote. The main difference between an investor, what's the difference between an investor and a trader? Well, a trader who loses money on his trade becomes an investor. They say, oh, I'm in it for a long term. If they make money, they get out. So you cannot divorce. If you depend on what happens tomorrow, if you cannot say I invested for 100 years, if you ever had to change allocation tomorrow based on new information, then you're investing for 1 day. So this and this is a big thing, and actually it was strangely enough in my first technical book published 23 years ago, Dynamic Hedging, where you explain that it's what I call the Markov property. You see that there's no and effectively it's a wrong way to approach problems. I want to invest for tomorrow, okay, but I treat the same way. So and it's the same reasoning as saying, oh. Plane crash. We have plane crashes on average every 20 years, but I'm only going to travel for 2 days. You can't really, it's a memoryless process. So this is how I treat it. So I would treat everything at both short-term and long-term, okay? And I would say everybody should do that. Because if you invest in say I'm investing for 20 years, if there's any reason for you to change allocation tomorrow, because you found something monstrously more attractive, okay? You saw the great mansion, someone's bankrupt, selling it, and you switch out into this, then you're effectively investing for 24 hours. You see, this is what I call the memoryless investing, okay?
Bala is on the
Wow, what a conversation that is. And here's a plug. It's going to be back right here at 6:30 p.m. on ET Now. World-renowned author of The Black Swan and Skin in the Game, Nicholas Nassim Taleb, only on ET Now in conversation with my managing editor, Nikunj Dalmia. But let's return to the business at hand, which is, of course, the second day of the press conference by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and the Minister of State for Finance, Anurag Thakur, on a whole host of issues to stimulate the economy. She spoke about the 5 pillars that the Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke about day before yesterday at 8 p.m. Her measures to pump prime the economy, for rescuing the economy today, primarily focused on the migrant labor, the farmers, and street vendors. She's also trying to revive the economy by creating demand and creating employment with the real estate sector. So I get you the Amitabh Bachchan of the real estate sector and also the president of ASSOCHAM, Niranjan Hiranandani. He's joining us right here. So is our in-house expert and consulting editor, Maitli Busrimat. I also believe Sunil Duggal of the Dabur is joining us. I don't know if he's connected as yet, but let me come to you first, Niranjan Hiranandani. You have been making a lot of recommendations to the Prime Minister's office as well as to the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. Some of the big announcements, of course, which will impact and have a domino impact on industry at large, has to do with migrant labor. We saw heartbreaking images. It's actually civil society more than any political party which has gone onto the streets perhaps to feed migrant labor. You heard what the Finance Minister today had to say about taking care of them. You're going to see extra food for them, measures to make sure that they get minimum wages, that they're employed via MNREGA, and also One India, One Ration Card. But to make sure that they also have employment, some measures that have been announced as far as real estate goes. And this, of course, to make sure there's employment, there's construction activity, which will pick up the economy. If I could first get your initial reaction.
I think I would say that it starts with empathy. And I think that's the most important signal that we have got. After seeing migrant workers walk from 500 to 1,500 kilometers, I think this empathy which comes today from the Finance Minister's statement today, I think breaks that problem into 2 parts. Number one, it tries to focus and see that every segment of the poor and the needy are addressed. I think they take into coverage of every segment that is to be done. Fortunately, we have surpluses of food, and that's the first thing she addresses, to see that there is free food given to the poorest of poor, and that is something which I think was a good starting point. Number two, the addressing of migrant labor in a manner which is actually very difficult, because they have moved from the place of work into the states. And I think the divided responsibility that she puts up to state that the states will take up a part of that responsibility to identify these people and reach them is the second. They also talk about the technology input, which means one nation, one ration card. And I think that is very significant because over a period of time, how do you actually reach a direct, not money transfer, but food transfer to the poorest of poor? So I think that concept of doing that and seeing that the rest of it are people. There is also another unique thing, which I thought was wonderful, is the question of identification of the balanced people who are not identified. And an effort, a supreme effort made to identify those people who have not been identified, don't have ration cards, and still they have to be reaching food to those people. Again, the states have been involved into that activity as in that respect. Of course, the housing for the poor, housing for the segments of society, which is the poor and the poorest, which they will do only by a rental housing scheme for the migrant. This was a concept which was of the old, and it has been brought back. If you know about Mumbai city, it used to be the charitable trust, which had lots of properties which gave the chawls on rent. And I think this is really being brought back in a different measure to the entire country. And I think it's a wonderful idea. Rental housing policy is still on the Housing Ministry's website, which has not yet been approved and done. But I think this tends to leapfrog that issue completely and see to it that the poorest of poor, migrant labor, and the repetition of creation of slums, wherein now today 50% of the population of Mumbai state, this is actually doing a dual effect. A, providing affordable shelter. B, in order to see that there is an input into that segment of housing. Third, put employment into that potential. And fourth, prevent future slums from being created in the urban areas. I think that's a multiple thought process that has come up. I also like the idea of expanding each segment. So when you talk about the farmers, it's not just the farmers. You talk about the fisher folk, you talk about the animal husbandry. So in each of the segment, some person has gone and identified the gaps which are there in the definitions of the thing. So I think if you look at it across the board, I see three major things that have come about. One, identification to reach all the population of the poor who need to be serviced. B, either taking the responsibility in order to reach this direct transfer or handing over to the states to do the next, using technology to take it to the next level. And fourth, in order to see that different items are taken care of as early as possible. So a time frame has been fixed up for most of these items. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I see a complete change in terms of the thought process which has taken place, not only about saying 1,500 crores or 8,000 crores or 2,000 crores or credit availability, but actually to give a time frame that, oh, this money will go within 2 months, this will happen in 6 months, the rationing cards will be issued in X amount of time, and by the year of March of 2021, 100% of the people will be there. I think these kind of targeting is there, and it's extremely important because that's the way the bureaucracy will actually implement the ideas. Of course, the responsibility will now move to the state governments and to the bureaucracy, and I'm sure that they will also fulfill this task. I think their empathy is the beginning of Nirmala Sitharaman's statement today, and I think it also ends with empathy. I think these are the two clear-cut ideas of it. The amounts of money are not so important. I think the idea being that every segment is taking care, and she's mentioned more than once that this figure is not final. The number of people is not sure. The amount is not, but we will take care of each of the segment. So actually, it's not just about budgeting a particular amount, but to a fulfillment of an objective, which is very important. I think empathy is the starting point of our statement today.
empathy was indeed the starting point, and she started trying to set the foundation for that itself yesterday. If I could go across to Maithili Bustermath, and with the foundation that Niranjan Hiranandani has laid for us, Maithili, they say better late than never. We saw those heartbreaking images of the migrants who were struggling to get food. It's in lockdown 4.0 that you're actually going to see the rollout of the One Nation, One Ration card, which is going to be portable as well. But having said that, and the finance minister made it clear it's going to be a bottom-up approach. Just look at what all has been announced today. A direct support to farmers and the rural economy, impacting 3 crore farmers. So you're going to see that take place with the 25 lakh new Kisan credit cards and all of that. But more than that, what she's also talked about, making sure that they have employment, because dignity of labor, that's also very important. So trying to boost the economy. And let's begin with some of the examples that Niranjan Hiranandani talked about, whether it's to do with afforestation, plantation, whether it is to actually develop new housing, all of that. If I could get your reaction. He's of the view it doesn't matter whether it's 6,000 or 8,000 crore rupees. The very fact that you're looking at ways to make sure that there is employment generation and dignity of labor far outweighs anything else.
Well, Nayanthara, I think I'm going to say I'm a little disappointed by the announcements today. In fact, my views could not be more different than imaginable from Niranjan Hiranandani's. The simple reason that yes, empathy is very important. And 3 of the 9 measures that she talked about today were about migrants.
We have lost connection with Maithili Bustermath there. We're going to reconnect. Perils of Life Television. What can you do? Is Sunil Duggal with us? If I could go across to Sunil Duggal, please. Sunil Duggal, we're going to get Maithili Bustermath back, and she's going to tell us why she disagrees on why the measures would be effective and all of that. If I could get your reactions, and I'll just read out some of them for you. A 1,500 crore rupee interest subvention for the Mudra Shishu loans. 5,000 crore rupee special credit facility as far as the street vendors go. The affordable rental housing complexes for migrant workers and the urban poor. Once again, perhaps to bring about that entire concept of dignity of labor, which you're seeing in lockdown 4.0. A 6,000 crore rupee employment push using funds that will be approved by the centre. A 30,000 crore rupee additional emergency working capital funding for farmers via NABARD. And in lockdown 4.0, One Nation, One Ration card. We've been hearing about this. Nandan Nilekani, the Aadhaar architect, tweeted about this very recently. This is going to be portable as well. When you look at the reforms, the announcements that have come in on day 2 of the economic package, 2 days after the Prime Minister talked about 10% of GDP as being the stimulus measures, stimulus. What did you make of today's announcements?
A lot of the announcements are very welcome. The ration card portability was something which should have been done many years ago, better late than never. I think this will ensure a freer movement of migrants across the job opportunities across the country. But today's focus was largely on agrarian stimulus and agrarian subsidies, etc. Now, ironically, the agrarian sector is the only performing sector of the Indian economy today. Agri GDP growth is expected to be around 3%, which is extraordinarily high by any standards which we have seen over the last decade or two. The other sectors, manufacturing and services, are the ones which are really taking a beating, and that's something which we have to be concerned about. Now, having said that, the agrarian economy provides employment for almost half of India's labor force. So if that does well, and if there are some further stimulus happening there, it is only welcome, and it will definitely fuel consumption, especially amongst the staples end of the whole consumption spectrum. So I do see demand being pretty resilient if one is referring to consumption coming from that. But I think we have to address the services sector, and so far we haven't seen too much of that happening. Some of the MSME stimulus was discussed yesterday. Some of the agrarian and migrant labor related issues were discussed today. But what happens to our services sector, which is, like I said, 60% of GDP? If that doesn't heal, then the GDP issues are going to remain very salient. GDP growth is going to be very compressed. And ultimately, that will have a bearing on the entire economy in terms of tax collections, in terms of employment generation, etc., etc. And I'm not saying there are any easy answers, But I wonder if enough attention has been paid to that part of the economy which is under the most severest of all stresses. Rest, of course, any stimulus provided, of course, we can afford. The check is welcome in these stress conditions. I do expect consumption amongst the non-discretionary part of the whole spectrum to revive quite sharply from the second or third quarters of this year. It will still be not a great year for consumption. I think the first quarter damage is deep, starting with the fourth quarter of the previous fiscal, continuing into this quarter. But the healing will start from the second and then accelerate in the third or fourth. But again, this is referring to the non-discretionary part, the discretionary elements which are driven substantially by non-agrarian, especially the services and manufacturing sectors, remain under ICU, and I don't see any revival of that happening in a hurry, given the stimulus packages which have been announced.
Okay, so you are not sounding as optimistic as Niranjan Hirandani. I believe Maithili is back with us.
Much of it, what my comments were caught because there was a huge storm going on in Delhi at the moment. And I'm not sure you can hear me, but I was saying that I was rather
7:30 p.m. if you want to tune in for that interview. Please carry on.
Nayantara, can you hear me?
Yes, Maithili, please carry on.
Yeah, so I was saying that I was rather disappointed with the FM's announcements today because though 3 of the 9 measures that she announced were for migrants, in fact, the section that is most in need of support, it would have been far better if she'd announced an outright cash payment in each of the Jan Dhan accounts. The first tranche of 500 rupees is just peanuts, and that was also given only to a small section of the Jan Dhan account holders. So far better than what she announced today would have been an immediate cash payment into each of these accounts. Not that any of the measures that she announced today are not worthy of discussion, worthy of being taken forward. For instance, the national one nation, one credit, one nation, one card, ration card is a wonderful idea, but these will take time to implement. Similarly, free food grains. If we had the systems in place, we wouldn't have seen this kind of mass migration. So it's not going to be easy to implement. So all these measures, good as they are in themselves, do not address the immediate problem. The immediate problem is that the migrants and all the sections of the population that have really been hit by the pandemic need some immediate support. And that is what is missing in government's package today. I do wish the FM would make up for this next time round and come out and say that, yes, we need to give some succor immediately, and that will also help prop up demand. So I think that is what is most missing in today's package. And last point, I was quite amused to see that almost all the measures that the government has announced so far are through the banking system. Please read public sector banks. And these are the same public sector banks that are constantly being maligned and constantly being criticized. In fact, in the latest economic survey, the CEA ran down and castigated the public sector banks, saying that they lose so much money. Now, if they're going to do all this kind of basically social work, they will be losing money. So I think it's time we realize that the contribution of the public sector banks. And as we say, yes, there are inefficiencies associated with the public sector. They also pitch in big time when you find no private sector bank ever stepping in to do these things.
Fair point. In fact, yesterday what you actually saw the government do was ensure that the banks give out risk-free loans. You've got 7.8 lakh crore rupees that has been parked by the banks. We're just not seeing credit offtake take place. But a very valid point that Maithili is also making there, that how will we make sure that you create demand? And that's when I'm going to go across now to the tax expert I've got on the panel, TP Ostwal. TP Ostwal, when the Prime Minister spoke day before yesterday at 8 p.m., one of the words he said and phrases he used was tax rationalization. Now, usually after a war, you see a hike in taxes. And the Prime Minister did declare a war after COVID. Having said that, yesterday the Finance Minister made some changes on TCS and TDS, and there's been confusion. Do you have any clarity today, 24 hours after the announcement actually came? Who is eligible for the TDS? What will be the new rate for the salaried class, for the professionals, the consultants?
Across the sector, for all the sectors, the TDS will be reduced by 25% basis points. In other words, where the rate of tax was 10%, it will become 7.5%. Where it was 1% for the contractors, it will be 0.75%. Likewise. Now, this across the board, this reduction has taken place. Therefore, there is no separate schedule is required. It is only by one sentence everything is taken care. However, one rider, salaried employees will not be impacted. The salary deduction of tax at source will be full, same. There is no change. So, therefore, salaried class is not taken care. Rest of all sector, they have reduced. But I fail to understand the reason how it becomes stimulus. Because if you have deducted tax at source lower than what it is required to be, say 10% instead of 10%, you are deducting 7.5%. The tax liability will remain same of the person. So he will have to pay the differential by way of an advance tax. And if he defaults in making payment of advance tax, then there will be repercussions will be different. He has to pay the interest. And therefore, this has genuinely speaking no impact, because as the 3 months are getting, 2 months are already over. The TDS advance tax will become due on 15th of June, first installment, 15th September, second installment, and likewise third and fourth. So therefore, differential tax will have to be paid by individuals who will be required to pay by an advance tax. And if there is a shortfall, there will be a charge of interest. There is no reduction in the charge of interest. On the contrary, there is no even the exemption limit. For example, TDS not to be deducted if the interest payment is up to 10,000 rupees. That limit has not been increased. That continues to be same. And in the case of the firms having or the having tax audits, the TDS requirement was there. That should have been deferred for 1 year. I think government should have done little more on the tax front that is visible directly, rather than giving all these indirect benefits. No doubt, other benefits are very, very relevant and useful. The Dr. Niranjan Hirandandani has explained everything very nicely. But the tax front, I have major failure, TDS front, total failure. And second thing, what they are saying is, you will be getting a refund. Is your obligation? Is it that they are obliging the taxpayers? The refund ought to have been given long before. If the refunds have not been given to the taxpayer, they should find out and hold the tax officers accountable. Why they have been holding on the refund? And they should have.
I take your point.
Okay.
I take your point, Mr. Oswal, over there. In fact, even yesterday the finance minister said all receivables, from the centre's side will be paid, and all outstanding dues will be paid in 45 days. And that cannot be counted as stimulus. But in reality, we don't see that taking place, right? So let's just hope it is indeed expedited the way the finance minister had hoped for. I wish I could continue with my entire panel. We're completely out of time. I have to take a short commercial break here. Many thanks for tuning into this special broadcast. Today was day 2 of Nirmala Sitharaman's press conference, giving out certain details of the 20 lakh crore rupee economic stimulus.
20 lakh crore. That accounts for 10% of India's GDP. I want to hear the excitement in your voice, sir.
This is amazing, and we never dreamed that India will offer something like this.
We had in ASSOCHAM suggested 14 lakh crores. He's beaten us completely in his thought process.
Job creation can happen if government spends money on infrastructure, for which they can generate money through the issue of tax-free bonds. We are all one India, and we must dedicate ourselves to creating the strongest India that we possibly can. This is what I think the Prime Minister's vision is.
He will cover land, labor, liquidity, law, the 4 Ls he talked about, which means I think he's looking at a holistic package.
With the monetary policy and with this package, I think this will give an enormous boost of confidence.
These words obviously ring a positive bell after a long time as far as the markets are concerned.